So the question is, is the brain a generator of consciousness or is it a receiver of consciousness? And I don't think either is true. I think that both ideas are fundamentally false. So I think that first that space and time don't exist unless they're perceived. They're only forms of our perception. That means that nothing inside of space and time exists apart from our perceptions. That means the sun, the moon, the stars, these are all icons of our interface. That includes the brain, and that includes our neurons. So what I'm saying is that the brain is just a symbol that I create if I look inside of a skull. Neurons do not exist when they're not perceived. They create none of our behaviors and none of our perceptions and none of our conscious experiences. Neurons have no causal powers because they don't even exist when they're not observed. They're symbols that we create. They don't create us. But there's another theory that people have that they say, some people say, well, okay, the brain doesn't generate consciousness, but it's like a receiver. There's consciousness around, and the brain is like a radio receiver that's picking up the waves of consciousness. But that once again assumes that the brain really exists and has causal powers, and I deny that. The brain is not a receiver, and it's not a generator of consciousness. So I think that consciousness itself is fundamental, and I'm working on a mathematical model of consciousness just on its own terms. So consciousness is not inside space and time. Quite the opposite. Space and time are just some of the data structures inside certain conscious agents. So you create space and time. You create all the objects that you see around you. It's all you. You're creating all this stuff on the fly. This is your user interface. The brain is and neurons are just symbols that we create in our interface when we look inside skulls, when we look through microscopes at brains. They don't exist except and only as our perceptions. So they have no causal powers, not even a causal power to be a receiver or a generator. My guess is that the universe itself is a vast social network of conscious agents, but it's an infinite collection of conscious agents, just like a vast social network like the internet. You are one conscious agent, but you're also composed of an infinite hierarchy of conscious agents, from very, very simple conscious agents that interact to create more complicated conscious agents, to create you, a very, very high-level conscious agent that's very, very complicated. And what you call your body and your brain and so forth is just your interface description of something that's not even in space and time. It's all these conscious agents that are what I call your instantiation. They collaborate together, they combine together to create you. But you have to see yourself through an interface. And so one of the symbols that you use to describe all these conscious agents that are you is the brain. So the brain is just a symbol, just like the blue icon on your desktop. I wouldn't say that blue icon creates anything. It's just a symbol on your desktop. It doesn't do anything. It has no causal powers. Suppose you're playing a video game, some game where you're stealing cars or something like that, right? And you could talk about, all the rules about how to play the game. If you do this, then the car will run you over, and if you do that, a helicopter will come in. So you can talk about all the rules of the game as though it was true. But it's not fine if you're a software engineer and you're trying to actually understand the relationship of the video game to the diodes and resistors and voltages inside the computer. If you're trying to understand that relationship, the fiction that the car on your screen has causal powers is going to get in the way. That's just not true. So it depends on what you're doing. If you're trying to understand everyday neuroscience, just how different parts of the brain activity are related to each other, then it's perfectly fine to talk as though neurons have causal powers and that they cause my actions and so forth. But if you're really trying to get under the hood, if you're really trying to understand how the brain activity is related to conscious experiences, then the fiction that neurons have causal powers is the key problem for stopping us to solve that problem. We have to let go of the fiction that neurons have causal powers if we're going to solve the mind-body problem and understand consciousness.